Okay, so let's get started. I have a lot of material to cover today. If you have any questions during the presentation, there is a chat window on your Teams toolbar. Go ahead and enter any questions. We will answer all questions at a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So good afternoon or good morning. Welcome to Training Bites. My name is Gina Thomas. I am the training manager at C&K Systems and your hostess for Training Bites, a digestible approach to Counterpoint training. So I get a lot of questions about reports because there's lots of reports in Counterpoint. You know, what report to run when? What is the difference between sales analysis and merchandise analysis? Which are really good questions. And what report can I run that will show me just more than sales? You know, maybe I want to see sales and on hand or sales on hand and received. And then when I'm in these reports where I can build, how do I save the report so I don't have to build it from scratch every time I want to run it? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Sales analysis by group and merchandise analysis. These are two of my go-to reports, and pretty much anything I need to know about Counterpoint, I'm going to find in these two reports. Then there's a couple of other helpful reports that I'll show you, like your inventory history and a couple of loss prevention reports. So let's start with like a 30,000-foot view of my two favorite reports, sales analysis by group and merchandise analysis. So what's the difference? In sales analysis by group, that report will only show sales. So there's not a mechanism in a sales analysis by group report to report on sales and quantity on hand, strictly sales. Now, a feature of the sales analysis by group report is that you can have comparative dates, this year versus last year, this month versus last month, yesterday versus the day before. A merchandise analysis will let you see multiple data types on one report. So a data type is sales, a data type is quantity on hand, another data type would be on order, received, adjusted. So in a merchandise analysis, you can have all those values on one report. A feature of merchandise analysis, if you have more than one store, is that you can actually view location detail within the report. And something that's very nice about merchandise analysis is some of the columns that you can choose have KPI, they're KPI columns, key product indicators, like your weeks on hand, for example, your stock to sales, your turn. Something to know about both of these reports for those of you that have Crystal and like doing your own designing, you cannot modify in Crystal a sales analysis by group report or a merchandise analysis. Most other reports you can, but these two you cannot. Matter of fact, if you ever open up one of these reports in Crystal, there's a huge note from the developer at the top that says, don't do it. You won't get good results. Do not modify these reports. So under sales history and reports, you'll see sales analysis by group. And the very first decision you're going to make is how many columns do you want on the report besides the standard, item description? And these columns are quantitative. So do you want 7, 10, or 11? I usually stick with 7. 10 sometimes tend to make the report wrap, and there's nothing wrong with report wrapping. It's just more difficult to read. So I recommend 7. Maybe do 8. Your next choice is what report do you want to run? And here's the beauty of sales analysis by group. There's a bunch of reports already in here, already made that you can modify. So I like sticking with the reports that say ticket history line and ticket history. There's also a lot of item-driven and customer-driven reports, but these are my favorite. So what's the difference between a ticket history line report and a ticket history report? Ticket history line reports, by and large, tend to focus on your merchandise, whereas ticket history reports, by and large, tend to focus on header footer information. And I'm going to give you a visual on that. So if you think of your receipt, and I have a picture of a receipt here on the left. Your receipt is actually in 3 different parts. You have a header up here at the top, your store name, ticket number, sales rep date. You have a footer down at the bottom, subtotal, tax, and total. So when it comes to these reports called ticket history, it's generally dealing with header footer information. But the body of the receipt has your merchandise. My men's polo, 100% cotton, the quantity, the price, the total. So the ticket history line reports tend to focus on merchandise in the ticket. Once you select the report you like, you can come down here to print. It's gonna default to top 10. But you can use this drop down and say, well, I want to see everything. Or maybe you do want top 10 or top 11 or 12, or there's also a choice to do bottom 10. And it can be bottom 3 if you like. It is just the suggested numbers 10. Then print and order by. The way this screenshot is set up is it's saying print this report in order by item number, which is kind of silly. So you can actually use the print and order by and have it arrange itself by total sales. So the item that sold the most in dollars ranks to the top, or quantity sold. So the item that you sold the most units pulls to the top. Down here in dates, you have A, B, and C. A, whatever date you like. You can enable B and C. Now in this example, if I enabled B and C, then B would be year to date last year, and C would be year to date the year before. You can have any 3 date ranges here. It doesn't have to be year to date or month to date. It could be last month versus a month before versus the month before. Down at the bottom, if you have more than one store, you can click on all stores, but understand that all the sales figures will be combined. So you won't see the sales separately for each store. You'd have to run the report for each store separately. So once that's all done, you're going to go to select columns. This is where you can select columns to appear on the report. And when you come to select columns, you see the available columns here. There are no descriptive values. Like I always get asked to get vendor item number. Can I have vendor item number on the report? It is not part of the report. It is not an available column. These are only quantitative. And when you're looking at quantitative values in the available columns, when it comes to quantity or sales, there's a few different options, but what I like the best, I like the plain one that says sales. This one means net sales after discounts before taxes. And the same with quantity sold. My net sales after returns. And we'll look at some of the other values when we actually get into the software. Over on the right, dollar rounding. I usually like that unchecked because I'm the type of person that when I'm looking at a report and I'm looking at sales figures, if I sold $25.26, I want to see 25.26 rather than 25, which is what it would show if I did the dollar rounding. Sometimes not having that dollar rounding, it's easy to glance at the report and confuse the sales column with the quantity sold column. Quantity rounding, if you're the type of business that sells maybe coffee by the pound, but also by the half pound and quarter pound, then you would probably want to uncheck quantity rounding so you can see that you sold exactly 1.5 pounds of coffee instead of 1 or 2 pounds. Then this percent to totals I really like, and I'll actually show it to you in a report later on. The important thing to know about percent to totals is if you choose a report that's 11 wide, you lose this capability. But as long as it's, traditional 7, 8, 9, 10 columns, you'll still have this ability, which actually is, pretty good information. The ticket history line, item tab are all filters. So if you don't want to see everything that's sold in that date range, you could filter down. Once you've designed the report, you can save it. That way you don't have to build it from scratch every time. Because some of the default values you see in visible columns don't include cost or quantity. They just have sales. So once you build the report, you're going to go to Options, Save Parameters, and then you'll go to a new page. And on the new page, you'll type the report name on the report line. And then I also like you to type it down under the description. And you can, even put more in the description, maybe the name of the report. And this report will show sales and discounts and retail before discounts. You could have all that in the description. And then you save. And I'll show you how to recall a saved report when we actually work inside the software. Okay, so next is merchandise analysis. Remember, this will look at multiple data types, not just sales. So that's under inventory reports, merchandise analysis, and you have a few decisions to make here on the parameters tab. Analyze by group will be a very summarized report. Analyze by item, which is your other choice. Oh, slide got away from me. Analyze by item will be very granular. Then you can tell the report to arrange itself, group it by category or group it by vendor. And then you can print all or top 10 or bottom 12, top 2, whatever you like. And then rank by, the item or group that had the most transactions will pull to the top. Again, I'm a bigger fan of sold and quantity sold. Down at the bottom, a limitation of the merchandise analysis report is you can only look at one date range. Over on the right, if you have more than one location, you can run the report for all locations and Counterpoint will combine the numbers. Or you could run it for all locations and then enable this switch down here, show location detail. That means, well, show me the item or group that's sold and how many sold at each location. You could also, if you have the type, if you have really a lot of stores and maybe you have your stores segmented by A volume versus B volume, East Coast versus West Coast, you could even choose that as a location group, or you could do a specific location. You can show a pie chart, not practical on an item level report, by the way, pretty on like a group report, like a sales by category report. Location detail. Include inactive inventory. This is such an interesting switch because you would think, at its surface, it means, hey, if I have any items in inventory marked as inactive, include them in this report. It's actually not what that means. It means if you just built a fresh item, perhaps you put it on a purchase order, but you have not received it yet, or sold it, or done any type of transaction against it, Counterpoint considers it inactive. So if you want to see those new items that you built that have not been received or sold, you would include inactive inventory. And then you have the dollar rounding and the quantity rounding. I usually uncheck the dollar rounding. Then when you go to select columns, here's an important thing to know about this. When you're in select columns, there's a switch at the bottom called show all columns, which is unchecked by default. So you definitely want to check that so you get all the available columns. Then on the right, you would put in what you want to see on the report. And so you can see I have a lot of different data types here. I've got sold, on hand, received, on purchase order. Once you're done building the report, you'll save the parameters by going to Options. And then to load the report, you'll go to Options again and load the parameters. And we'll see that in action. The Item tab and the Inventory tab are filters. So if you want to narrow down what the report's returning, you could filter for categories or for vendors or maybe last sale date. And then some other helpful reports that I really like. The Inventory History Report, which is literally an audit trail of every transaction that ever affected an item quantity or item cost. So this is a great report to run if you can't figure out how the current on-hand value got to be that value, or how the current cost, the average cost, became that cost. The other two reports that I like to run on a regular basis for loss prevention purposes is the return tickets report and the voided tickets report. And this voided tickets report is for tickets that were completed, the receipt printed, and then we went and voided the transaction. That's what that report focuses on. Okay, so I'm going to just exit from the PowerPoint presentation, and we'll just come into the software. And so I'm going to start with sales analysis by group. So you're going to go to sales history, reports, sales analysis by group. And I made it a favorite, so I wouldn't have to click 3 times to get here. If you don't know how to make a favorite, it's super easy. Hover over the item you want to make a favorite, and then just click inside the star. And now it's a favorite. So your favorites will appear on your favorite shelf down here. And favorites are specific to the user, they're not global. Okay, so let's go into sales analysis by group. That's what I like about my job. Hey, watch this. Nonsensical errors. Okay, so the first decision you need to make is how big do you want the report? Traditional is 5 columns. I like 7 the best. Then group by. This is a list of all the reports. So there's customer related reports, and again, these are all sales reports. But these customer and item reports are helpful if you are using profile fields and attributes. So I'm just going to scroll down. So ticket history line, dealing with the merchandise, by and large. Ticket history, header footer, by and large. So I sell apparel, which means I have items that come in different colors and sizes. So there is a report in here for apparel items. We'll look at all your sales, but it'll focus on your apparel items as a single line. It'll show it at the color and size value. So I'm going to go ahead and select this report that's already been built by Counterpoint. My print defaults to top 10, but I can make it all, or I can make it bottom, and it doesn't have to be 10. It could be 11 or 12 or 13, but I'm going to make this all. Print and order by. Well, I don't want to print an order by item number. That's kind of silly. I want to see what's driving my business. Sales, quantity sold. Show that to me. So if you use this drop down, there's lots of values in here. I typically stick to quantity sold. There's a lot of quantity values. These are theoretical. Quantity sold means show me what's sold after returns, and the items that sold the most units are going to rank to the top of the report. The other one that I like in here is just this plain one that says sales. So all these other ones, again, are theoretical. If I were doing full price selling, what would my sales have been? But this one here is true net sales after discounts, before taxes. So it's a very realistic preview of your sales. Then we have our dates. So this is set to year to date. So if I enable B and C, you can see it's doing year to date for the year before and the year before, but it can be any 3 date ranges. I like setting dynamic dates. A dynamic date is anything in this list except custom. So you have year to date, you have month to date, you have quarter to date, and you'll notice too, and it's probably, I know this causes some confusion with some people. Well, I have year to date and I have year to date company. What's the difference? Year to date is going to look at a standard calendar year from January to December. Most people run on a standard calendar year, January to December. So if you're one of those types of people that runs a standard calendar, there's no difference between these two. They're the same. However, if you have a fiscal calendar that's different from a standard calendar, like your fiscal year's from October to September, year-to-date company will look to your fiscal calendar. Something I don't do when I save my reports is I don't put a custom date here. The reason why I like the dynamic date, year to date, month to date, week to date, quarter to date, is because when I save the report, the next time I go to load the report, the dynamic calendar is going to roll with my computer calendar. So for example, if I save this report year to date and I loaded it tomorrow, then it would run from January 1st to November 3rd. If I just put a date here, like let's do yesterday's date, see how the dynamic date changes to custom? So if I save this report like this, then the next time I run the report, it's automatically going to be from November 1st to November 2nd, forever and ever and ever. So that's why I like dynamic dates. Let's do a year to date in here. And again, it doesn't make any difference for me because I have a standard calendar. Down at the bottom, do I want to just look at sales for my main? Well, I have 3 stores. So if I click all stores, it's going to combine all the sales figures together. But I'm just going to say main here. Now in select columns, by default, Counterpoint's saying, well, let me show you your net sales and your profit. It's not true profit, though. It's really should be called margin more than anything. But what I want to see here is how much it cost me to make the sales. And I want to see how many I sold. So if I want to add something to the visible columns, I find what I'm looking for, highlight it, and I can click on this arrow, or I can just double click. If I don't like the position, I can hold down my left click and drag it. But something that gives you a little more control is if you highlight it and move it up. And then I want to see quantity sold. And I want to move that up. And as I select these columns for my 7-wide report, you can see down here, Counterpoint's keeping track. So if I added another element, this is sales price 1. See how this turns red? Counterpoint gets a little mad. So I'm just going to get rid of something. Sales price 1 is a theoretical value. And what it means is if I sold everything at full price, what would my sales have been? So it's actually a good comparison column. You know, well, here's what it was before discounts. Here's what it was after discounts. Again, I'm going to uncheck dollar rounding because I want to see the odd cents. And I definitely want to see percent to totals. I'm going to leave my filters blank. So basically, I'm saying to Counterpoint, at the item level, show me all my sales year to date for the main and rank it by sales. So whatever brought in the most dollars will pull to the top. So now I'm going to preview. So you can see pretty nice looking report. I have my item number and my description. And if I come down here to shoes, you can see this is a gridded item. It comes in colors and sizes. So Counterpoint's showing shoes, white, 7 wide. Then you can see my full price selling. If nothing had any discounts, this is what my sales would have been. But here's my actual sales after discounts. So you can see this TL2 here took a discount somewhere along the line. And then the cost of sales. This is average cost, by the way. Units sold, profit, I like to call that margin. And then there's that percent to total that I like so much. So why I like this is basically what this is saying here is out of all the money you collected in this date range, all the money, you can attribute 21% of those dollars to this item. Now notice we're looking at page 1 of 1+. So when you go into an initial preview, pretty much anywhere in Counterpoint, it does not give you a total page count. If you want to see the total page count, you have to click on this arrow with the line in front of it. Now when I go back to the first page, now I see my total page count. And just like any other preview, anywhere in Counterpoint, you know, whether it's a report preview or a lookup preview, you can always come up to this envelope up here and export your report. Just choose a format. If you want to export to Excel, you have to have Excel installed, by the way. And then you can choose a destination. You know, maybe you just want to send it right to the application. Maybe you want to save it, you know, to your desktop or a folder on your C drive. You can go ahead and export. And of course, if you want a hard copy, you can print. So I like this report, and I don't want to have to build it from scratch every time I run it. So I'm going to save it. So I'm going to go to Options, Save Parameters. I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it Gridded or Apparel. And then I'm going to give it a description. So I'm just going to highlight Control C. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Item sales gridded. So I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to do Control C. Down here in description, Control V, V as in victory, and then you can add additional information. Sales, cost, quantity, and then save. Now I'm going to close out of here. So now I want to run that report that I built. I navigate back to sales analysis by group. And as soon as the screen loads, I'm going to go down to options. I'm going to load parameters. I'm going to load my report. Down here, I'm going to click on load. So let's say I load this report, but today I don't want to see all sales. I just want to see my top 10. So I'm just going to come here and I'm going to say, show me my top. Well, let's just do top 12 just for fun. Okay. And, I don't want to rank it by sales because I find when I rank by sales, my expensive items tend to pull to the top. So I'm going to rank by quantity sold. Now, of course, my cheaper items might end up pulling to the top because I tend to sell more units. And, I don't want to see year to date. I just want to see month to date. I still like all these columns for this report. I don't need to filter for anything. So now I'm just going to preview. Okay, so here I have my top 12 ranked by quantity sold. So you can see in that date range, I sold 7 units. And of course, you have your grand totals at the bottom. And of course, you can export. If 100%, which is the default, is a little too small for your eyes, you could use this drop down and make it bigger. A little easier to read. So now remember, on the fly, oh, you know what? I want to see a pie chart too. Again, these pie charts are not practical on a full item report, but something like a sales by category, sales by vendor, they just make the report pretty. And because I only have 12 items, it should look okay. So here is my pie chart. And the reason why, 12 items is okay is because Crystal Reports fits it nicely. If I were actually looking at all my items that were sold in that date range, these pie slices would start to overlap each other. All right, so remember I changed a lot and I ran my report, got what I needed, and I close. Now I didn't save anything. I just changed some things on the fly. Don't be afraid to change things on the fly because when you go back and you reload that same report, I'm going to go back to options, load parameters. I'm going to go ahead and load the same report. So even though I changed a few things on the fly, once I was done running the report, Counterpoint set it back to the way it was when I initially saved it. But let's say this happens. Well, I like this report. It shows me all my sales, but I really like that top 12 report. And I don't want to have to change all these switches every time I want to just see top 12 month to date. So we're looking at an existing design. We're literally going to copy from this design to save the top 12 report. So I'm going to go to print, top. I want top 12. I want it to print in order by quantity sold. And I want it to be month to date. So now I'm going to go to options and save that. This is literally just copying that report to this new one. I'm going to go to save parameters and I'm going to give it a name. Now it's going to look like I'm overwriting the original report that I copied from, but I'm not. So it's still going to be item sales gridded, top 12. I could say here, top 12, and then save. And I'm going to close out of here and show you what that did. Because it did kind of look like I was overwriting the original report, but I really didn't. All I did was copy from it, and not with an actual copy button, just by virtue of changing some fields and saving it to a different name. So I'm going to go to Options, Load Parameters. So you can see here's that original report that I just recreated, and here's the one that I just saved. And then when I load it, it's all ready to go. So that's sales analysis by group. Now, sales analysis by group only looks at posted sales. It doesn't look at unposted sales. So what would you do if I told you that in point of sale, there's actually a report that's exactly like the sales analysis by group, but it's for unposted sales? So if you go home and you go to point of sale and reports, you should have this button. If you do not have this button, log a support ticket and have a technician add it to your menu for you. I'm going to click on Unposted Sales Analysis. Okay, same thing, I got to make decisions. What do I want the report? 5, 7, 10, or 11 columns. What report do I want? Now, instead of ticket history line and ticket history, we have document header, footer stuff, and then we have document line, merchandise stuff. So I want to do a sales by hour. And this is also available in sales analysis by group, great for payroll planning, sales by hour. And I want to see all. And the date is only going to be today because this is only going to look at unposted sales. So I can go to select columns. And again, by default, I can see sales, but maybe I want to see cost. Maybe I want to see quantity sold. And again, I can move them up with the up-down button, which is a little bit easier. I'm going to uncheck dollar rounding. Definitely want to see my percent to totals. If I leave my filters blank, it means all my sales today that are not posted. And so now I'm going to, maybe it's 1 o'clock. I want to do 1 o'clock reading, right? So I go here into preview. So you can see I was really busy between 7 and 8, and then business just dropped off. But I was really, really busy between 7 and 8. And the same rules. Once you find the report, you modify the report, then you need to save the report. So it's Options, Save Parameters. I'm just going to call it Sales by Hour. Well, it looks like I already have a Sales by Hour. I'll call it Sales by Hour again. I'll just come here and Control C, Control V down here in the description, and then you can add additional information. Totally up to you. Then when I want to run my unposted sales analysis for anything, I just come in here unposted. Just like in sales analysis by group, once the page loads, I'm going to go to Options, Load Parameters. This time I'm going to load the sales by item. Okay, so sales by item will load. Always takes a moment. This is going to print all, but notice it's going to print by item number and item number order. That doesn't help me figure out what's driving my business. So maybe I'll arrange this by sales. Okay, and then I'll just preview it. And so now it's a little more granular. And because I ranked it by sales, whatever collected the most dollars pulls to the top. In this case, 21% of my sales came from this item today. So that's unposted sales analysis. It's the sister of sales analysis by group for unposted documents. Next, let's talk about merchandise analysis. So that's a report where we can have more than just sales. Or maybe we just want to see on hand and on order values, more than one data type. So inventory, reports, wrong place, reports, merchandise analysis, I made mine a favorite. Analyze by group or by item. So if you want something summarized by group, something detailed, do it by item. What do you want to print? Top, bottom, all. How do you want to rank it? I want to rank it by sales. How do you want it grouped? You don't want to group by category. You can't do this in a sales analysis report. You can't run an item level report and group it by category. It's just not available. But in the merchandise analysis, you can. So down at the bottom here, again, I would select a dynamic date. If you just type in a date here, it becomes a custom date. It just remains the date on the report if you save it. All locations is going to combine all the sales information or on-hand information or on order information all to one line. So maybe I want to do it for a grouping of my stores or maybe a specific location. Or I do want all locations, but I want to see a breakout of each location. So you could just come down here and show location detail. And of course, we got our pie chart, include an active inventory, new items that I built that are on order, just haven't received them yet. Make sure they show up in the report. Uncheck dollar rounding, or you can leave it checked, it's up to you. Then select columns. So look at this. See how big the scroll bar is? You are not seeing everything that's available. And I wish I could change the default, but I can't, so it's just something you need to remember. Watch what happens when I say show all columns. So show all columns, and I watch my scroll bar. See how small it became? Because it just added lots more, again, quantitative values. There are no descriptive values. They all relate to numbers and money. Now on the right, by default, number of transactions, how many sold, net sales, cost of sales is the average cost, by the way. But maybe I want to see on hand. Maybe I want to see my current quantity on hand. So I'm just going to come down here and click on hand. On hand, whenever you see that value anywhere in Counterpoint, it means any report, it means at this moment in time. So in other words, quantity on hand ignores the dates, ignores them. Sales pays attention to it. Sales definitely pays attention to the dates. Quantity on hand does not. It means on hand right now, this moment in time. Also, another one to be aware of is quantity on purchase orders. This is all your open purchase orders, even if they're 10 years old. So it's a good idea to keep your purchase order module fresh and up to date so you're not seeing obsolete information. So quantity on purchase orders like quantity on hand. It ignores these dates. It shows you everything that's on an open purchase order, no matter how old it is. Then once you get your columns on here, you can go ahead and preview. Now, because I have so many columns, see how the report is wrapping? Not real pretty. So I'm going to just fix that. So I'm going to escape from here. I'm going to get rid of these profit guys. I don't need to see that. So let's preview it now. Easy fix. So a report that wraps to me is very difficult to read. It's a lot easier if it's very lineal. So this is a beautiful report. It's showing me my item, a description, location, transactions, how many were sold, dollar sales, cost, that's average cost, current quantity on hand, and any quantity on a PO. And because I said break out my locations, for the items that I sold at different locations, it shows me the item and the information for each location. And of course, if I go to the last page, I get my grand totals. And of course, just like with any other report, I can export it, print it, enlarge it, find out how many pages it is. Something that's really good to know about merchandise analysis is not only the fact that quantity on hand means now, and quantity on purchase order means all my purchase orders. There's actually a value here. I'm just going to get rid of all these here. I'm just going to double click. There's actually a value here called quantity beginning balance. There's cost beginning balance and retail beginning balance as well. Then there's also quantity ending balance and quantity on hand. So quantity beginning balance is paying attention to a date. So is quantity ending balance, but not quantity on hand. So if I go back here to parameters, and let's just make this for, let's say from the end of September, right? I'm just using my minus sign, by the way, in a date field. Minus signs will take you backwards in a date field. So when it comes to beginning balance, Counterpoint's going to look to September 30th. And I'm going to make the ending balance as of last month. Okay. So quantity ending balance pays attention to this field. And then on hand is today. So here's what it looks like. Okay. So in September, I had 240. The end of October, I have 0, and I currently have 0. What's one that's different? Let's go to another page. Apparently, I haven't sold too much lately. That's why they're all the same. But anyways, so beginning September 30th and October 31st, on hand now. And then I mentioned something about KPIs. You know, for those of you that are familiar with a KPI, key product indicator, a feature of merchandise analysis is that there are some KPIs here. So maybe what I want to know is I want to know my sales. So I want to know quantity sold, quantity on hand. And then I want to know weeks on hand. You know, based on my rate of sale, how long can I have this merchandise? So here's weeks on hand. And there's other things in here like turns, stock to sales, sell through. Okay, so now this is going to show me my current on hand, what I sold in this date range, and based on the volume of sales in that date range, how many weeks on hand do I currently have of inventory? So I'm going to preview. So you can see here, I have 30 on hand. I haven't sold any. So my weeks on hand, I got plenty. Here's one here. I sold 7. I'm sorry, I have 7 on hand. I sold 1. And based on my rate of sales in that date range, I have 32 weeks on hand. So 7 units is enough to last me 32 weeks, unless some anomaly happens. Somebody comes in and buys all 7 units in one day. Just like in sales analysis by group, once you build the report and you like it, you can save it by going to Options, Save Parameters. I'm going to call this Sold on Hand, Weeks on Hand. Again, I'm just going to copy that down to the description. Pretty good description all by itself, but you can add additional information. Okay, and then you're just going to save. Then when you want to run the report, you browse back to merchandise analysis. You're going to go to Options, Load Parameters, find your report, load. And again, if you want to make changes on the fly, as long as you don't save them, after you run the report, it will revert back to the way it was when it was originally saved. So that's merchandise analysis. Good stuff. In the slide presentation, I talked about the audit report. So there's so many times when I'm working with somebody and they say, I just don't understand how this item got to this quantity. It doesn't make sense to me. or I don't understand why this item is this cost. So under inventory and reports, there's inventory history. Now, if I've got a bunch of problem items, things where I'm just not sure what's going on with the quantity, this report can be very overwhelming. So you want to focus on one item at a time. Typically, when you figure out what's wrong with one, you'll know what's wrong with the other ones. I like to order this by date. So I see everything in date order that affected the item, quantity, cost. I also want to see detail. And you want to employ filters. So I'm going to go to inventory history. I'm going to put in my item. And then if I'm multi-store and the problem is really isolated to one store, I would probably filter for that one location as well. So I'm going to go ahead and preview. So you can see anything that's a positive number is an upward adjustment to the inventory. Negatives are downward adjustments. So you can see when you do a sale, if it's not a return, it's taking it out of inventory. If you have a sale that's positive, it was a return, got returned back to inventory. Your receivings should be positive because they're usually adding to the inventory. But something I want to point out is physical count. A lot of people look at this value and think that that was the value of the physical count at the time of physical inventory. Not true. That number is an adjustment from the create. So in this example, when I did my create step, this particular item had 65 on hand. I actually counted 5. So when I posted the inventory, Counterpoint had to do a downward adjustment of 60 from 65 to get me to what I actually counted, which was 5. So that's your inventory history detail. 2 other reports for loss prevention purposes, because people do steal from you. You want to monitor your returns and your voids. The most common way people steal from you internally is bogus refunds or avoiding a transaction where somebody may be paid in cash. So we have return tickets, and that's all under sales history reports, and we avoided tickets. So I follow the same rules with both these reports. I always enable item detail because people doing bogus refunds tend to have favorite items, and show payment detail because people doing bogus refunds tend to have a favorite tender type, like their own credit card. Make sure you employ date filters. Otherwise, you're going to get all the return history from the dawn of time. I'm just going to do year to date because I don't have that much data here. So here you can see a total of 2 returns in a year. So really not bad at all. Now that's not real life. So what you might want to do, maybe after this call, is go run your returns for January. Compare that to February, March, April, on, and establish a norm. So it's normal during certain times of the year to have 5 returns a month, or other times of the year when we're busy to have 10 returns a month. That's the norm. Then you run this report and it spikes. It goes to 20 returns. Okay, that's a red flag. So then you have to find out why. Now, it might be something simple like, we got a rash of defective merchandise and people returned all that defective merchandise. Okay, easy enough. But maybe it's something more nefarious. So you can see on the report who rang the sale. You can see the pay code here. You can see the items on the ticket. And then you would very nicely maybe ask that sales rep some questions. Wow, saw a lot of returns last month. What's going on? And again, very nicely. Okay, so that's return tickets. Establish a norm. The same with voided tickets. Now these are sales that have printed, but not yet posted. So this only shows void afters, not void durings. So I'm going to go into the voided ticket report. And same thing, item detail, show payment detail, filter for a date range, just use year to date. Again, I don't have that much data. Preview. And so you can see I had 3 voided tickets. There's the payment over there. You can see the items, see the cashier. So again, you establish a norm. And if something spikes outside of that norm, it's time to take a closer look. Now, maybe you hired somebody new. They get a little ahead of themselves and they made a lot of mistakes. Okay, that explains that. But like I said, maybe it's something a little more nefarious. So keep an eye on your voids and your returns. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation. And we'll go from the current slide. Oop, so let's go back there. So hopefully today, or after today, you know how to build and save and recall a sales analysis by group report and a merchandise analysis report, and also how to audit your items in the inventory history, and also how to monitor your returns and your voids. When you get your link to the recording on Friday or Monday, there will be a survey attached. I appreciate you filling it out. Give me your feedback, topic suggestions. You can remain anonymous. Or if you want to take the survey today, you can go out to our website, www.cksystem.com/training bites survey. Next month, December 7th, our favorite time of year. Not all of you, but most of you conduct your physical inventories at the end of the year or the beginning of the new year. So this is, a timely topic. On December 7th, I'm going to talk about preparing for the inventory outside of the software and inside of the software, the actual physical inventory steps. Even if you're using scanners, the steps are still the same. CP Mobile 2B, it's all still the same steps, except you have something to scan your items. And then post-physical inventory, how to run the reports on the inventory and identify your high shrink areas. So sign up. It'll be fun. Okay, and of course, if you want Counterpoint tailored to your business, learning on your data, which makes a lot of sense, you can call me, the main number extension 3, or you can email training@cksystem.com. And with that, I shall take questions. And so I got a couple here in chat. Okay, yes, you were letting me know you could hear me. Fantastic. Does anyone have any questions? Edith, does your cat have any questions? No. She thought it was perfect. Oh, thank you, Karen. Yeah, I always like these sessions, and I really had a lot of participation. I think I had 60 people sign up, which is really good. Okay, well, then that being said, no one has any questions. Everyone have a lovely day. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you on December the 7th.